screen?
Yeah, I'm coming.
Okay.
Yeah, is it fine? Hello, everyone. My name is Tayo Adejare. Slack name Deja. I'll be taking you guys on introduction to API, and yeah, we're in the PHP stack. So let's go right into this. What is an application programming interface known as API? An API is an interface that allows two independent software components to exchange information. An API acts as an intermediary between internal software functions and external ones, creating an exchange of information so seamless that it often goes unnoticed by the end user. Let me give you an illustration or an example. Okay, for example, I go to a restaurant and the waiter comes to meet me and asks, "Hey, Deja or J-boy, what do you want to eat?" He gives me the list of foods he has. Then I pick one. Now, me picking one, what does that mean? Trying to make a what? A request. Let's try to imagine that. That I'm trying to make a request, me what? Picking a food I want to eat. So now what does the waiter do? The waiter takes the request, takes it to what? To the kitchen or where the food is served, and he serves the food. Then at the back, what's happening? Preparation of food is happening, then the food is being served. Now, all these are process happening at the back end for what? For the user to get what? A response. Now, the waiter gets the food and brings it back to what? The user, or brings it back to me. Now, what has happened there? I've made a request. The request has gone to the back end. The back end is the kitchen. Let's use that. And I got a response with what? My food. Now, there are two ways in this thing. I might request for a food and the food is not available. I might also request for a food and the food will be available. So all this is just like an intermediary. Now, who is the API here in this example? The API is actually the waiter. It's actually connecting me, which I'm the person, the user side, the front end, to what? The back end, which is what? The food, the kitchen. So it's an intermediary between internal and external ones, creating an exchange of information so seamless that it often goes unnoticed by the end user. Now, I'm at the restaurant. I request for a food. The food comes. I don't even know what happened at the back end. I don't even know if what they actually put too much salt or put less salt. And what I just know that I'm getting what? A response. Now, I don't know what has happened. So I didn't even notice anything. So an API acts in that format when we're trying to what? Combine two what? External softwares together. Now let's go straight into the next point. And which is what? What is REST? REST means what? Representational state transfer. REST is an architectural style used for communication between client and what? Server. Now, I'm a client to a website. Yes, I go to the website. Maybe I already have an account. Now I'm trying to log in. What is happening there? I'm trying to communicate with the server to what? Authenticate me in, like, okay, to check if I'm actually a user on that website. So now the REST architecture style is used for communication between what? The client and the server. And what? REST uses what? HTTP. REST uses what? TTP, which means hypertext or transfer protocol. Now, REST data are always sent either by JSON or XML. Like, look at an example of what a JSON data looks like. Now, if you check our composer.json here, now you're seeing this. What does this JSON file entails? It entails the data about what? This Laravel project. I'm just using this as an example. It entails the data about what? This Laravel project. Now, JSON is actually used for what? Entailing, like, structuring your data for users to be able to, for it to be able to be readable by user. Now, look at, this is what a composer.json file for a Laravel project. Now, I know that what? The name of this project is what? Laravel/Laravel. If I want to change, I change it. Now, I'm having the description that this is what? The Laravel project. It's readable. I know what is here. I can simply explain what is here even though I'm not a programmer. So REST is an architectural structure used for communication between the clients and the server side. And REST data are always sent either by JSON or XML. XML means what? Extensible markup language. XML is not XML is quite complex. That's why people most use what? JSON, because it's easier to read and what's not like unlike XML. Now, there's something very important in API. Now, like I explained before, when I was talking about the restaurants, when I go to restaurant, the restaurant example. Now, I said something there. I said that me getting to the restaurant and I request for a food that's not available, what happens? The waiter comes back and tells me that the food you're trying to request for has finished or we don't have it. Now, all these are based on what? The status of that what? Food. Is this food available or not? Yes or no? Am I a user to this application or not? Yes or no? So now, a request can never be what? Can not always be successful. Like, okay, now you request for maybe pocket money from daddy or mommy. If daddy does not have, he will tell you he doesn't have. I can't give you what? This what? Money, because I don't have. I don't have. So API is just like a request response movement. You connecting what? The client side to the server side. And the main purpose of this API is to connect two softwares together, either both internal or external, and what? To transfer data between them. To transfer what? Data between them. Now, I'm very sure you guys have done little things on, or you guys will understand what we call front end and back end. And we know that front end is what? The client side. Back end is what? All the magic is done, all the logic and everything. Now, you notice I go to a website, I'm seeing what? An interface that looks good, like looks good. And I'm trying to go like use that website, and what happens? I'm seeing some data on it, like, okay, for you to be able to do this, you have to log in, or for you to be able to do this, you have to put in your PIN. Now, what is storing all those things you are putting to check? And where's all those checks happening? And how is all your PIN sent to the back to the checkpoint? Now, all these questions are what API answers. It has given you like an intermediary to be able to like transfer data to what the backend, and what also what get data from the what backend. Transfer data to the backend, maybe insert, and you guys have done SQL. You've done something in respect to CRUD. CRUD means what? Create, read, update, and what? Delete. Now, I have you guys did a task on this school application. Now, I'm having a data that I want to what? Create. I want to push this to what? To the database. Now, there are two things happening here. You are seeing the interface. The client is seeing the interface. But the client is not seeing how the data is being passed to the what? The backend. What is happening on the backend? And the API is waiting for, okay, well, give me what I'll send back what? To the user. All these are just what? An intermediary of what? Transferring data both back and forth, either to the front end, or the front end is transferring data to the what? To the back end. Now, there's something that is very important that we need to talk about, which is what? HTTP methods and service response. Now, let's look at this table. Like I talked before about what? CRUD. CRUD means what? Create, read, and what? Update. Now, I send in a post request. Like you guys know that post request is actually used mainly or frequently for what? When you're trying to insert data into a database. Some people use it when they're trying to update, but there's actually a request verb that is used for what? Updating what? And a data in your database. Now, I have a create request. Now, from the create request, I mean, you sit down and look at it that, okay, I'm trying to create something. I'm trying to insert something into the DB. Now, for example, I'm using like, okay, I'm in a blog website, and I have an account, maybe like Facebook. And what do I want to do? I want to like create a post for people to see. Now, what you're seeing as a client, like as a user, is just pictures, is just UIs, is just forms that you put in and you type in all what you want. But there's something that is carrying all what you've typed to the backend, saving it into the database, and giving you a response that's, hey, Joy, hey, Deja, you've successfully published your post. Now, what have we done? We've sent what? A create request to the backend. And what has API helped us do? API has helped us what? To connect what we are seeing, which is the user side, which is the client side, which is the software, to another software, which is what? The backend side, that helps in what? Inserting the data into the database. And the API waits for it. Insert, give me a response. If it inserts, it will bring a response that, oh, Teja, you successfully published your post. If it does not insert, oops, something actually went wrong when you're trying to insert your post. So all this has actually helped in what? Breaking the gap between what? The user side and what? The what? Server side. Now we have another type of request called the what? Read request. Now, I'm very sure we are most conversant with what? The post get. And I think in the last class, when you guys did introduction to Laravel, you guys talked about the CRUD, which means create, read, update, and delete. Now we have the read request. The read request means what? Okay, go into the database or go into a particular space, get me some data based on what? Condition. Now, we did something related to conditions where we talked about that for a condition for you to satisfy a condition, you have to like give it some data that is needed. You have to, for you to like run a block of code or do something, you have to satisfy a condition. Now, you're telling an application that, okay, go into the database, read some things for me. I need this data. Now, what API does what API will do here is that go to the database, say lagbaja, they just said you what I need what this so database. What or this data from this database. Maybe okay, I need to fetch all my balance, my transaction balance, and the API goes to the backend. Say hello, I need the data balance for Deja. Then it carries it, brings it back to me, and within a twinkle of an eye, I'm seeing all the transactions I've made maybe in a particular month. But what has done that? The API carried your request, which is what's your request? To what? Get me all the transactions I've done what? Maybe within the month of March or April. And what? Taking it to the backend, instructed what? The backend, hey, I need what? This data. Now, what's API doing there? API is giving what? A programming interface. Giving what? A programming interface, giving like an endpoint that, okay, if you hit this is what this is going to do. If you hit this is what this is going to do. Now, when programming APIs, you have what? Different endpoints. Endpoints are like checkpoints to get a particular request. Like, okay, I need to log in. I need what? An endpoint. I need like a route, like a road to follow for me to be able to like log in. That's what API is giving. It's giving that endpoint like for you to be able to communicate, for the front end to communicate to what? With the back end, get you what? Authenticated. So now let's move to the next one. The next one is what? Update. I'm trying to update my profile. Now, update is in two forms. We have the put and we have the patch. People use this wrong, but I'm going to explain the difference. Now, when you're trying to perform a put request, a put update request, what that means is that you're trying to perform what? An update on a particular role. Like a complete update. Let me use that word. A complete update on that particular data. But when you're trying to update just a single data in that role or in that data, just a single thing, use what? Patch. Okay, like for example, I'm driving my bicycle and the tire got punctured by a nail, yeah. So I take it to the maybe organizer, okay, my tire got punctured and I need to like fix it. The organizer will not change the entire tire. What you just do is just like get like a seal to cover that hole up. Now, what has happened here? He has actually patched your tire. So there are actually difference between what? The put and the what? Patch. Now, if you took the bicycle but with a torn tire, like completely damaged tire, what would the organizer do? It will advise you to what? To change the tire. And what will happen? It will change it. Now, that's what like an example of what a put request. So now, we're trying to update a database, and we have a front end, we have a back end. The intermediary there is what? The API. API takes what? The request from the front end and takes it to the back end and says, hey, hello, Deja wants to update his name to what? Coded gift. And what happens? If the logic actually works, or if database if it actually updates in the database, API comes back and says, hello, your username now is what? Coded gift. Now, what has happened here? I've updated what? My database. I've updated my data with what? The API, with the help of what? The API. which is an intermediary between the what front end and what the client side and the what server side. Now, the last request is what the delete request. There are many other requests actually, but the main 4 requests you have is what the CRUD, which is what create, read, update, and what delete. Now, to delete a data from database is similar to everything I've been saying, but the only difference here is that you're completely deleting what from database. Now, there are 2 types of delete. We have the soft delete, and we have what like when you're deleting totally from database. Now, soft delete means what? You still have that data in your database, but you're not making it visible to what? To the front end again. Like, okay, okay, which example? Okay, I have an account, maybe a savings account that I don't want to like save with this account again. Now I say, okay, I tell the API that let me go to the back end and tell this software that I don't want this account again. I want to like delete it. But for some purpose, the software does not want to delete it. Why? Because it's an important data that can still be referenced to if needed. What the software does there is just to what? Make it invisible for the what? Client side to see. Now, what has happened there? The client side is not seeing it, which is the user side. So I've deleted it, but I've not deleted it completely from the database. That's what we call soft delete. Not visible to the user, but it's still in my database. But when you're deleting completely from the database, you're sending a request to delete completely. I don't want to see any trace of this data in my database. So now we've been able to talk about CRUD, the create, read, update, and delete. Now, another important thing we need to talk about is what? The response. You actually make a request to get a response, yes or no? Yes. You can't tell daddy, daddy, I need money for my school fees. I need money for my tuition. And daddy just is and doesn't say anything, doesn't give you any response. You will feel bad. But when I make a request to daddy that, daddy, I need money for my tuition, either daddy tells me that no money on ground, or okay, I'll see you tomorrow for your tuition. Now, all these are what response from daddy based on the request you've made. Now, but a response can never be what 100%, can never be what, or can never always be true. Like, okay, now I request for money for daddy. Daddy cannot always tell you that for every request, take this money, take this money, take this money, take this money. There are some periods that daddy will say, no, I'm not giving you this money. Or there are some periods that daddy will say that you are not qualified to get this money. Maybe daddy says, okay, after doing well in your exam, I'll give you a tab. And after the exam, you didn't meet up to daddy's grades, and daddy tells you no. But that you're actually getting a response from the request you've made. That daddy, I want a tab when I finish my exam. And daddy gives you a condition that is until you pass this social grade, that's when I'll give you this tab. So now all these are responses from what? APIs. Responses from what? The path you've gone through, which is what? An endpoint. So now, what are status codes? Status codes are issued by what? A server in response to what? A client's request made to the server. I'm making a request. All these that I explained there was to make a request to what? To the server. To what? Do something. To make a crude process that either I need to create something. I'm making a request that creates this thing for me. So either the request comes with a response that, oh boy, I'm not able to create this stuff, or maybe the database is full, full, or I cannot duplicate your data in this database. That means you already have a data in that database. So status codes are issued by server in response to a client's request made to the server. Status code is a server response to the client to show if the request has been completed or not. Now, with this line, you will not get a response if what a request has not been completed or not. You will not get a response if a request has not been completed what or not. You can't go to a restaurant, make a request, and don't pay for the request, and I think you get a response. No. So a server response to the client shows if the request has been completed or not. Now we talk about status range. Now, all the status codes actually form what? A status range. Now we have the 200 status, the 200 status range, the 300 status range, the 400 status range, and the 500 status range. What I mean by status range is from the 200s. Now, anything that's starting from what? 2 tells the client that what? This request was successful. Like for example, I tried to like create a user. Now, me creating a user, I've told the API, I've made a request to the API that what I need to create what this user. I'm a new user to this website. I need to like push in my data into database so that I can be able to come back to use this website later. Sorry. So the database comes back, the request API comes back with a response that if it has actually put it in to the database or not. So if it comes back with a status code of what? 201. 201 means what? You've successfully created what? A data, or you successfully created something. That's what 201 means. Now look at what is happening there. It started from 2. So that means it was what? A successful what? Response. But if you already have a data there, and you are trying to put another data there again, you are trying to put another data of like input the same data there again, the response comes down and say that, oh boy, we already have this, you already have your data in this database. Why are you trying to do this? And it can give what? You are not authorized to do this, or you are trying to perform a bad request. A bad request means that this request is not will not give a successful answer. So any code that starts from 2 means what? A successful response. There are different codes like 204. 204 means what? No content. You can actually there's actually, let me give you guys. Okay, now so these are things. All codes that starts from 200 actually give what? A successful what? Response, like I said before. Now, the important ones you'll be using are mainly what? 200, which means okay. Like I'm sending a 200 request, which means what? Okay. Now, or a 201, which means what? I've successfully created what? A user, or I've successfully created a data, successfully inserted what? A data. Now, the next status range we will talk about is what? The 300, code starting from 3. This tells the user about what? Redirections. Now, for example, I redirect to a particular page, maybe after login. Now you get a response code from that redirection that you successfully redirected towards this particular page. So the 300 status gives what? Details about what the client's redirection. And the 400 tells you that maybe there's been an error in that request. For example, like I was telling you guys about that scenario that I asked for, Daddy said, okay, you had requested for a tab, and Daddy told you that you get the tab if you actually pass your exam. Now, where the error will come in is that If you don't pass your exam, you're making a bad request then, because what? You didn't fulfill what? The condition. It didn't satisfy that condition for you to pass that exam. If you've passed that exam, what would Daddy be doing? Daddy will be giving you a status code of what? 200, because you say, Daddy will say, okay, now you successfully satisfied my condition. Now let me go to Computer Village and get your tab and give it to you. So all these are responses from what? APIs. Now, the 400, any response code you have seen from 400, either is 422. 422 means unprocessable entity, which is mostly used when validating a request. Like, for example, you have in the registration page, you need to collect data, the first name, last name, email, password, phone number, and all these fields are required. If I send in a request to the backend and the request checks, I need all this data. It checks, do I have first name? Do I have last name? And it sees that you don't have an email. It will return the response and say, bro, email is required. I need this email for you to be able to like be a user in this application. So now it will return with a response code of what? 422. Means what? I'm not able to process what? This data you've given me. Now, another bad error is, or error code is what? 401. Which means what? I'm unauthorized. Like, for example, I'm a client. I come to the website, I register. Now, again, me coming again, I want to go into the admin. How is that possible? You can't be authorized to go into the admin if you don't have the admin credentials. Or you can't be authorized to go into that dashboard if you don't have the right credentials. So all these words are what? Bad errors. They are errors. 400 requests, 401, 422, 403, the likes. But the main important ones that you'll be using mostly are 400, which means bad request, 422, which means unprocessable entity. This mostly causes the validation error, and 401, which means what? Unauthorized. Now, the 500 request means what? Tells the client that what this has to do with an error coming from what? The server side. Coming from the server. Like maybe you have an error in your code, or there's a logic you wrote that is not working well, or it's breaking. A 500 response will be brought out to the user that, bro, we're actually having a problem with our server. Please try again in the next 5 minutes. Now, all these words are response due to the fact that API that has broken what? This gap between what? The front end, which is the client, and what? The back end, which is what? The user. Now, as a backend developer, your main job, or I'll put it as what? Your 70% job will be having you to like write APIs. As a backend developer, you always have to like provide the front-end developer with APIs. APIs are what? Endpoints. Like endpoints for the user, which is the front end, to interact with what? The back end. So now, when writing APIs, you don't just write code, you have to test your code. You have to check if that API is working or not. You have to like you need a software to hit that endpoint to check if this is actually giving me the data or not, or if it's actually working as expected. Now, there's a software we mostly use, which is what? Postman. This is a software used for what? Saving collections of your APIs, used for testing APIs, used for what? Mainly testing APIs and seeing responses from APIs. It gives you like a space to be able to send requests to an API and also get response. Now, I said we use Postman. There are other different API testing softwares like Postman and the likes. But as a backend developer, most people use what? Postman. And I'm going to be showing you how to use Postman. Now, Okay. I'm very sure you can see my Postman now. Let me make it big. Let me make it big. Okay, let's use this. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So now, this is an interface, a Postman interface. Now, I'm going to take you guys through how you use Postman and how you use it to test what endpoints or APIs, and how you structure your APIs using what the collection. Now, you have different workspace. You can add different workspace. Maybe you're working with different teams, and you need what to have you are working with different teams on different projects. Now it's always advisable to create what a workspace for you guys, for every team member, for a team, so that you guys will be able to work together easily. So we can easily create a workspace by clicking on this button here to create a workspace and add team members and the likes. Now, so let me go back to my workspace. Now, we also have a portion here to like put in the request. Now, like I said, endpoints. I talked about endpoints. Endpoints are like routes, are like road paths towards a process, like road paths towards to a process. Now, how that works is that it gives you what an endpoint to be able to like hit the API, or to be able to instruct the API to go to the backend and what give you all what you need or do a particular logic for you. Now, this is where we put in the words, the endpoint. Like for example, now if I send this endpoint, what actually happens now? I've done something here. I've told this words API endpoint to go into the database and what search for all the data, all the products I have. Now, what is happening here? It's showing me that what my session has expired. Now, what do you think? What happened now? I sent in a request. It went to the logic part, which is the backend, and brought in a response that, no, bro, your session has expired. What do I mean by session? Like you're no more on this app. You need to like log in, authenticate yourself. You're no more authenticated on this app. You need to re-authenticate yourself to be able to use this what endpoint to be able to get this data you're looking for. Now, if you look at, check here, we have the status here. If you can see this, what are you seeing? You're seeing that it's coming with a status of what 401, which means what unauthorized. And you see, and you remember vividly that I told you about like the 400 request, which is what an error 400 response, which is what an error response. Now, because I'm not authenticated, I can't get that that data that I'm asking for. So now it's bringing a status code that, hey bro, you're not authorized to what actually hit this endpoint. Now, Postman actually gives you the opportunity to get the status code you've seen. Now, it actually has a body where you get what your response data. It actually has a portion where you can set up your token to authenticate yourself. There are different tokens, authorization. Either you have your basic auth where you put in your email and password, or you have your bearer token where you put in your token to be able to authenticate an endpoint. Now, I talked about token. Token is actually used to what? To test API endpoints. is actually used, token is actually used to authenticate an API endpoint. How? Every request is always coming with an endpoint. Not all. But every secured request is always coming with a token. Now, what does that token do? It helps, it entails some encrypted data, which the backend decrypts and checks, is this guy still authenticated? Or is this guy a user on our application? So all this, the token is helping you to encrypt that data and what? Authenticate you for every endpoint, every request you're making to the backend. So now, Postman also gives an opportunity to check the time, or an interface to check the time that the request actually took. Like this request actually took 8 seconds, the size of the response. And Postman also gives you the ability to create a documentation. As a backend developer, you'll be creating documentation for what? Users, for your front-end developer. When you guys are working in a team, you'll be creating a documentation. What does documentation mean? It's like an interface that lists all the requests and all the response for each API endpoint. Like, okay, if I hit the login endpoint, this is what I'm going to get. If I hit the request endpoint, this is what I'm going to get. Let me give you an example of how a documentation looks like. Now, this is it. Now, this is an example of what? A documentation. Now, what is this telling me as a front-end developer? It's saying that, okay, for this sign-up request, you need to what? Pass in all these data. The first name, the last name, the email, the phone number, and what? The password. Now, without all this data, I can't make this request. Now, for you to get a 200 status response, you need to pass in what? All this what? Data. Now, it's showing you the response. If I'm actually what? If I successfully register. Now, what are you seeing? It's showing me this response that you successfully registered. And it's showing you what? The token. The token, like I explained, is what? An encrypted data containing some of what? Your data. Now, this is an example of a documentation. You've documented all the API endpoints, showing the user or the client side, which is the front-end developer, that, okay, for this request you're making to my backend, this is the response you'll be getting. So that's an example of what? A documentation. And Postman gives you an opportunity to create a documentation from what? Collection. So now, let's go back to Postman. So now this is your Postman. Now I'm going to make a sample request, and I'm going to like use a simple Laravel application that I have set up here. So so we have these two. We have this Laravel application here. And for example, I'm trying to create a request to maybe say hello. I'm using that as an example, or to get my data as a user. Now, the first thing I do, I create a controller. You guys have done introduction to Laravel. To create a controller, you have to just type a simple command, PHP assistant make controller. I've actually done that. So now, what that does is that it creates or set up a controller file for you to be able to like program into. Now, in the last 2 or 3 classes, we talked about OOP. And we said that what Laravel is what an object-oriented programming structure. Now you can see we have class. This index controller is what extends controller. That means this index controller is actually inheriting some properties from what? This controller. So now we try to create an endpoint that says what? Hello. Now, so if we're trying to create an endpoint that says hello, there's something we call the try catch. So now, what this will help you do, this is what we call error handling. You are trying to like undo errors, such in case that if this request does not work, catch the error and send back to the user side. Now, it's trying to say that try this logic. Maybe try the logic to what? Maybe echo Adejare. Now, if I'm not able to echo Adejare, what happened? It catches the error and say, why are you not able to echo Adejare? Then what? Send it to the user and say, bro, this is why it's not able to, the backend is not able to what? Send you Adejare or echo what? Adejare. So now let's try an example and what? Hit the endpoint. This is just a simple example. And now I'm going to be creating what? A simple CRUD. But it's not like, I'm not going to be working with the database. I'm just going to create something simple for you guys to be able to understand the way API works. And I think we'll be ending here. So now, we have a request to say hello, or let's just say to get our data. So I have a user data, and I have my name to be Adejare. You have my email to be who is Adejare @gmail.com. And I have my password to be, okay, let's say phone number to be, let's say 0012. Yeah. So now we have this data, but I'm trying to get the data using an API. What will happen? I send in a request to this, to the backend to get me my user's data. Now, how are we going to give this? We have the request here. The request has come in. We have the data here. Now, how are we going to send in what? Send back the response to the user that, hey, this is what your response for the requested what? Data. Now, what we do, how we do that in Laravel is just very simple. By what? Returning what? A response. Now, we talked about what? JSON. Now, why we are using JSON is because it's readable and used for what? Or used for housing data. Like I showed you that composer.json file that it housed the Laravel project data. So now we're going to be sending this data out in form of JSON. We can send it in form of XML and in form of JSON, but you mostly use in form of JSON. So now I'm sending what? The user. Now there's something that is missing here. We need to specify the status of that response. If the status of this response is what? 200, 400, or 500, we don't know yet. So we need to specify the response that for this request you've made, and you're able to get the user, the status to be what? 200. So I tell the status, and I give him what? The 200. So now what is happening here? If a request is being sent to this what? Backend, it gets the data. This is the user data. And it sends back a response to the client side that's what? Send the response in form of JSON with a status of what? 200. That's what's happening here. Now, if this by mistake or by syntax error doesn't work, or by any error does not work, catch the error and bring it out. Now, so to do that, what we do, we send a what? Return a response. A JSON response. And you can say the status, an error status, and send the message that what? Something went wrong. And for users to be able to see what went wrong, they can send in what? The error, which is what? The error here. So now the status here will be what? 500. That something actually went wrong with this request I made. That something went wrong with this request what I made. So now let's see this. What's happening here? Let's control. So let's see this. Then we go into our routes, API route. Then, okay, we already have a route. I've already created that to say what? Say hello. Now, when we run this application, we run this what? Using PHP artisan serve. So it's running on this spot. Now we have what? An endpoint to say /API / what? Say hello. Okay, we're having a syntax error. Okay, let's just take this off. Sorry. Oh shit. Sorry guys. The first thing I meant to do here is what? Create a method. I meant to create a method what? In this class to what? To handle my request. So now to create a method, like I said in the last class, you set up what? A public function to what? Maybe get user. Now you get in the request to send in, then try catch, then send in a response. What is this now? Or you can use throwable to throw error. just name this error. Then we type in our logic here. Users. Then name. Let's see. Picture. Let's see. See. Let's see. From to be. So then send return response. JSON. You can see and status. Success and what message is maybe successfully fetched data for user. Then user, I say the user is this. Then sending the status. This is status of 200. So this is fine. So now we have a method to what? To get the user. We already have the user data here. So now we're just going to send a request to this method here to what? Get the user. So now we've created a controller for that. We've created a controller to what? Send back what? The data, or send to the client side a response which contains what? The user's data. Now, in Laravel, all your APIs are actually written what? In this what? API.php. All your APIs are actually written what? In this API.php. See, here is where you can register your API routes for your application. So now, I have an endpoint to say what? Get what? User. Or let's say /user. Then say get user. So now what this is going to do that this is an endpoint. So when we hit this /user, what happens? It goes into this controller, sees the user's data, and say, okay, you want me to return a response. Which type of response? A JSON response containing this data, but with a 200 status what? Code. Now, if we try this, so /API/what? User. So let's use Postman to try this. So we have HTTP /API/user. Okay, 801. Why am I having 200? Wow. Okay, so now looking at this, we're having what? A response coming from where? This place. That what? Grabbing the data and what? Returning what? A response. Now, A request is being sent. Which type of request? We choose the request here. The type of request we want to make. Is it a post? Is it put? Is it patch? And is it delete request? We send the request to the backend. It hits that route. The route locates this controller and gets the user and goes into this method and say, okay, we'll return what? A response containing what? This user. Return a response containing what? This user. Okay, see, I'm meant to put the status code. Sorry. So we stated the status code to be what? 200. So that's it. So now, yeah, you can see we're having what? A status code of what? 200. But for example, if I've created a user, now how will I set a status code? Let's say, for example, this is the user's data. And for, it has actually pushed this data into the what? DB. Now, to set a status response for what? Creating the user, I set the status code to what? 201. Now, if I set the status code to 201 and I send the same request, what actually happens? Now, you're seeing here that what? 201 status code created. 201 means what? Created. That means the request has been fulfilled and resulted in what? This new resource being created. That means I've actually created what? A data. So now let's do something that we have to pass in a request data. Now, so passing a request data, we go to the body. You can pass it using form data where you specify all the keys for your form, or we can pass it through using a raw and using what? The JSON format here. So now, how are we going to do this? With the JSON knowledge, with the little JSON knowledge that we have, we can set what? A data here that we want to pass to the backend. Maybe, for example, first name. Now, let me just give you some little tips about JSON. In JSON, you don't use single quotes. In JSON, you don't use single quotes. That's the most important thing. So we have first name to be, let's say, Ibrahim. And we have what? Last name to be Adejare. Now, how am I going to get this response body in my request? What API will do is what? We'll grab the response data or the body data, also take it with what? The request to the backend. If the backend needs that data to perform the particular request, it will grab that body data and what? Use it to perform the particular logic and give what? A response. Now, how are we going to grab this data from here? Now, we have a request, which contains what? A request object. Now, in this request object, we have what? All this data. In this request object, we have all this data. So now, how do you know we have all this data in this request object? So now let's see this. Let's say our user is equals to what? Let's say first name is equals to request. Now, to get your body data from request, you can do it in different ways, actually. You can do it using this syntax to get what? Your first name. Or you can do it using this way, getting from your request object, first name. Or you can do it using this way. First name. But let's go with this way. First name, last name should be what? The request body data and what? Locating the what? Last name. So now we have these two. let's see if we're actually getting what the body data from what that response. Now, what I'm doing here is actually from the request I'm getting from this and from that API endpoint, get the first name from that request, get the last name from that request. Now, when you're sending this request, API grabs what this body data. You are pushing what this body data with what the data you're pushing to the what API. And at the backend, it grabs it in the request, access the first name from that request, and also what the last name from that request. Let's see the result of this. Oh, I didn't save this. Now, what do we have? We have what? Last name, first name to be what? Ibrahim. Last name to be what? Adejari. Now, it's always advisable when you're sending a data in, like maybe I want to create this user, I want to insert data into database, it's always advisable, or is you use what? A post request to do that. Now, maybe for example, you're trying to log in or you're trying to like register a user, you use a post request to do that. So now let's try changing this to a post request. Now change this to a post request. If I send this, it will say not found because I don't have an endpoint accessing or that end, I don't have an endpoint to grab that data. I don't have a registered endpoint for what? A registered route for this endpoint. So now what we're going to do now is to register that route to be able to access this API endpoint and also what? Process data. So now how are we going to do that? Okay, so the first thing we do is what? Go into your API folder, route, then make a register a post slash what? User. Now, you'll be wondering that why are we using the what? The same name or the same extension for what? For both the GET request and POST request. They are totally different routes. The GET request or GET route is different from what? The POST route. So let's also index controller class. Then let's say register user. Register user. So we have this. Now we have a route to accept what? That API endpoint. But we need to what? Perform a logic in that controller. So going to the index controller, which you specified, create another public function. Now, like I explained in the class we did OOP in, that what? A public method is accessible everywhere in the application. It's accessible everywhere in the application. Now, if I create a protected function or a protected method, what will happen? It will only be accessible to what? The people or the class extending that particular class, or like I said before in that class, right? It's only going to be accessible. All the methods and property will only be accessible to people that or to classes that are in that household. What I mean by in that household is that, for example, now you have a controller class. This index controller is extending from what? This controller class. What does that mean? That I'm using some properties from what? This controller class. So all the methods, all the protected methods that this controller class has, the index controller also has opportunity to use that method or use that property. But when you're calling a private method, it's only for what? That particular class. So creating a method to what do we name it here? We named it register user. Okay. So to register user request, because we're getting imported data. Then use a shortcut. Then now what do we want to do here? We want to grab the data, from the request. If there's a database setup, you save it to what? To database, or maybe perform some checks on the data passed, and was give, okay, then register or insert into the database. And what? Send or return response. So now, this is just like a simple process for registering a user. You grab data from the request. How do you grab data? Like I did here. Let's say the user we are grabbing maybe first name to be the first name sent in. Let's use this notation. Or this syntax. Request, then first name, then last name. Request. So for you to know that there's no difference between you doing this and doing this, and email request, email, and what? Maybe password. Request, password. Okay, so we have this. Now, doing this, we've grabbed all the data from what? The request body. So now, yeah, you perform some checks on the data passing. I'm not going to be doing this. So we perform our checks, maybe like validating the check and the data passing. You can use a request validator or using normal Laravel's validator. Then maybe check if the email has been registered or not, because you don't want to insert multiple emails. Now, all these are what? Logics that the data will go pass through before you get a response. Then you insert it to the database. Then if after successful insertion to database, then what you do? You return a response. Or we can say, let's say, okay, I'll do that later. We return a response. JSON, then status of success. That means successfully registered data, then in message. It's always nice for you to structure your response data this way, to have a status, to have a message, and to have what? If there is a data that you need to pass out to what? Have what? A data. So a data key here. So message to maybe successfully registered user. Then data to be equals to what? The user. So let's say 201 because we are registering a user. So now we've been able to set up what? A post route to what? To register what? A user. So now we hitting this endpoint, we have to get what? A 201 status code with what? This data. So let's try this. Yeah, email to be johndoe@gmail.com and password. Let's see, John Doe. So now we have all this data that we need to like pass into the backend for it to be registered. So now we send you this request. Now we're sending what? A post request. So what will this request do? This request will take this data, or this API endpoint will take this data, send it to the backend, perform all the logic on it, and give us a response. Let's see that. You are seeing what? Success. You successfully what? Registered what? User. Then what? Which data did I register? This is the data you registered. So you structuring your endpoint in this format makes more sense. Makes it really that, okay, what happened? What's the response I'm getting? A response will always have a message. A response will always have a message. So, and what? Also have a data, but not always have a data. Like for example, if you update a user or if you delete a user, you can't get the deleted user. So you just like give a message that, yeah, you successfully deleted this so data. So we've been able to like send in a post request, set up what? A get request, and how to do something that will break, maybe like give an error. So now let's try setting up a login route. I'm going to use the same thing. API/user/ or let's just say /login. Let's set up this route. Let's say oblique function to do login. Get the request and the request. So try. So then we have the user. Okay, now let's say we have what? The email. Now I'm trying to set up a login controller. Now let's say the right email and password, correct email. I'm just doing this because we don't have a database set up. Correct email to be request dot email. No, correct email. Okay, should be this. Let's say mail@mail.com and correct password should be this. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we want to authenticate what? Or log in this person if this details is equal to the what detail the user is entering. So we grab the data that is coming in from Postman or the body data. Let's say user email to to be equals to so user email should be equals to the email that is coming from both data and what user password to request your password. Now, we need to set up a logic here that if what the email is actually in our database. Let's say, for example, this is our database. This is only data we have in our database. Now, we need to check that if this email that the user is entering, because the user will not know this is the email or password, or if this email that the user is entering is actually correct to what we have in our database, log the person in. So now, let's do that. So we can set up an if check that if correct email or user email is equals to what? At correct email. Now, there's something nice to advise. You treat the bad people before treating the good people. How? You treat the bad request before treating what? The good request. What do I mean? That you actually what? Treat people that are with wrong details before treating people that are with good details. So now, what I'm trying to say that here, that you have to treat people that have wrong login details, which that means that if user email is not equals to correct email, what should happen? Let's return a response. Let's return a response. Status what? Because it's not status of what? Error. Message. Invalid what? Login or invalid email or password. Now, you only checking the email and telling what? Your the client that is your email that is not correct. If I'm an hacker, I will know that it's my email that is not correct. Let me keep trying different emails. But when you're sending a response message, I'm saying that either email or correct is not, either email or password is not correct. It will be kind of confused that which one is not correct. Is it email or password? So it will be very hard for the hacker to, okay, try. If I try email or password, it's not possible, or it's 99% impossible for him to get what? The data, the correct data. So now we send in error message that will what? Not give straight to the point message that what's happening in the backend. Like now, on the backend here, you know that what is the email that is not correct. After checking only the email, you know that it's just the email that is what? Not correct. But you can't just put a message out there and say that what? Email is not correct. It's not actually right. You give in a message that what? Either email or password is not correct. That's fine, because it will be kind of confusing to, if an hacker is trying to enter into your website or your application, he has the email, but he does not have the password. He can try the mail, and if you're not saying your password is not correct, what happens? He keeps trying different password. But when after trying the correct mail that he thinks is correct, and you're saying invalid email or password, you will be confused that where is this error coming from? Say, I got this email from blah, 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 blah. They will not understand. So it's going to be very hard for him to what? Go into the website by trying what? Different password. And there are also other validations or you can do to what? Stop that. But that's later things. So setting what? The status. Now, I'm not able to go in. I'm not authorized to what go in because I don't have what right credentials. So which status response will I use? Which status response code will I use? I'll use what 401. So now I'll say else if, like we talked about conditions. When I talked about conditions, loops, we talked about condition, the if else, and the switch different kinds of conditions. But yeah, let's just use the if else if. That means I'm giving another opportunity for what? Another condition. Else if what? The password that's user password is not equals to correct password. Now note, now this password has to be hashed before taking to database. It's because we're just doing an introduction. That's why I'm doing this. JSON, the same data, same response. So then last condition. That means now look at what has happened here. After checking, if the email is not correct, show this response. But as a correct guy with correct email, with correct credentials, this will give you a false condition. That means what? I'm actually correct details. This will actually give you false. So after not satisfying this condition, then what happens? Return a response. Now, which type of response are we going to return? An OK response. OK response, which means what? 200 status what? Code. Success. Message. Sorry. Logged in successful. Okay. So let's do this. And we'll give a status code of what? 200. So now, what have you done here? We've been able to check or compare the password coming or the credentials coming from the what? The user side, that's the client side. Comparing what? The user, the email and password you have in what? In a database. I said like an example, I'm using this word as a what? Database. So after comparing this, what actually happens? We have response for each conditions. So now let's see this. But before we go into Postman, let's register this route to do login. Go into our API because we're writing APIs. Let me just duplicate this. Slash login. A post request going to still using index controller. Then do what? Name of the method. You mentioned the name of the method there. Do login. So now let's try this. So now the data we're passing in is what? Email. And what? Password. Let's say the password is this, and the email is what? Let's say bell@mail.com. Now, we're sending a request to what? A post request to what? A/API/what? Login. Now, which response are we getting? We're getting what? A 401 unauthorized what? Response. Coming from where? Either either here or here. That means either the email or password is what? Correct. We don't know. So now if we put in correct email, correct password, we'll still be getting the same. Then this person is what? Not authorized. Now we'll be able to set up an endpoint, an API endpoint to be able to what? Undo what? A login function. To what? Undo a login function that if this person, if this user, or if the request that is being made to the backend has a body data of what? A body data of a correct body data of correct email and user correct email and password, log the person in. Now, like I listed all the logics that will happen. Maybe first you have to validate. That means all these two fields has to be required. You can use Laravel validator or set up a request to set up your rules, and you check if the email has been registered before. That's if the email exists in DB. If the email does not exist, you send it because you're trying to log in. You don't just send email does not exist. You send what? Invalid email or password. Like I explained before, then if they check for the password, after checking for the email, and the email is actually existing in the DB, yeah, this guy is actually one of our users. We check if the password is tallying, then what? If it's tallying, we'll log the person in. So now let's try correct email and what? Password. So this is it. So let's send the request and let's see the response. Now what happened? We are seeing what? A status of what? Success. A message of what? Logged in what? Successfully. Now, with the way I'm bringing out my response, it's so understanding that what? This is what has happened. You've actually logged me in. And what? I'm getting a status code of what? 200. That means everything actually went what? Fine. You had the correct email and what? Password. So now, before we call it a day, there's this last thing I want to show you how to do on Postman. Now, you'll be working on different projects and you need to have a space where you create or where you save all your endpoints. Postman actually gives you an interface to do that, which we call collections. Now, to create a collection, you come here. So now, create a new collection. We'll give it a name. Maybe, let's say Zurich collection. Then I can set up an authentication for every endpoint in that collection, then give it a token. Then after doing all that, then save the collection. So now what do you have here? You have what? A Zurich collection. So now this gives a space to add different what? Requests. Different requests, that means what? Different what? Endpoint. So now you can add what? Different requests to a particular collection. Now this will actually help you what? Make all your endpoints structured. Now if you look at this project, I have what? All collections. Everything is arranged. I have like my auth collection. In authentication, you actually sign up, sign in. If there are other types of authentication like social auth, like Google auth, like Facebook auth, is actually structured. And this also gives an opportunity to what? Document all your endpoints from your collection. So now you can actually document it from here and what? Also share your collection with what? The front-end users. So now, this actually comes to the end of what? Introduction to APIs. Like I said, API is breaking the what? Intermediary between what? The front end and what? The back end. The guy transferring data from the front end to the back end, also getting response from the back end and transferring to the front end bank. In the restaurant example, an API is what? A waiter. You go to the restaurant, the waiter comes, hey bro, hey sis, which food do you want? Gives you food list, you make a request. The waiter carries that request to the kitchen or what? Maybe the serving point, serves the food. Now, all those kitchen, cooking, everything that happens, the serving, that's what is done on the back end. So after serving, the kitchen attendant says, okay, take this food to this user. The API also grabs it. The waiter grabs it, which is the API, and what grabs it at a response and gives to the user and said, hello man, this is your food. So I feel you guys should understand what I've been able to say. And if you have any question, please hit me up on Slack. My Slack name is Deja. Have a nice night and God bless you. Thank you.